If you sell highly customizable projects like wedding planning, construction projects, kitchen remodeling, or anything where you need to develop a quote, which takes you tons of time and a bunch of different Excel spreadsheets in order to compile, I'm going to show you something that I built for a client, which saves a ton of time. And this here is what we call the event quote customization engine. So the way that this works is as follows. And what I'm going to do is walk through all of these items and then show you what's happening when we get down here. I'm just going to change this to tier 4. So let's say, so this is for a company that we're working with who do weddings and event plans. And the way that this works is there are a ton, and this is going to change in a second, just going to flick and then go into a different set of items. But the way that this works is that there are packages, there's an invoice amount, there's a total cost, there's a quantity, and then there's a set of hours. And there you go. This here is a template that was calculated for this client. And what this did is save them a ton of time, because we now have, let's say here, there needs to be, for the number of people that are going to be at this wedding, let's say there's going to be 80 people at the ceremony. All they would need to do is go through here and just change the number of items, and you can see how the costs change for all of the things that are occurring. We have different goblets, we have different edged silverware, we have different napkins, and you can see how these items are all calculating, and what they're calculating to is a total margin. And that margin for this client, they wanted to maintain at least 40% margins on all of their weddings. And you can see here that this is the actual cost, i.e. the cost of the items for you to get for this specific wedding. And then this is the invoice amount. This is what goes on the actual invoice. So these here have been generated in a way that makes it so that you don't have to add every single new item whenever you have a quote that needs to be created. So why did we make this? What was the problem? Why did we actually have to remake this? Because what ended up happening when we were working with this client is that we made a first version, but it didn't meet the demands that they actually required. So we actually scraped it down, went back to the drawing board and tried to understand exactly what came out of this that we knew would actually solve the problems that they're looking for. And we ended up with this situation. So how did we get here? What's at play here? What's actually going on? So what I'm going to do is show you the real, from first principles, what the problem was. The problem is called the many to many problem. So here I have a list of companies, just fake companies, random companies. This is real. If you're in the UK, you know about the B&Q. But we have vineyards, we have in-house items, we have B&Q, which is like warehousing and a bunch of other things as well. We have Joe's Hut, which could sell anything. And then we have Amy's Bakery as well. Then you have the items that would go into each of these specific weddings or events or line items as part of what you're actually selling. Well, the problem is this. Amy's Bakery definitely does catering, but they probably also do cakes as well. Joe's Hut might also do cakes, and they also may do some sort of grazing table production or development, some sort of catering. They also may give you chairs. We know B&Q, being a warehouse store, gives you chairs, gives you tables, gives you cloths, and a bunch of other things. We also know that the vineyard is going to do, alcohols and a bunch of other things as well. And we also know that there are in-house items that we have, like the lighting, we have our own chairs, and we also may have our own tables as well. Now, the problem is this. One, here are the 4 main problems that we actually tackled. But problem number 1 is, how do you balance costs? Well, this person sells this item. This item may be of multiple different types. So there may be 3 or 4 different plans for catering which need to be stored and need to be accessed, and picking the right one can sometimes just be a manual drag and drop type situation when it comes to creating them in Excel. You also need to go in and reference how much each thing costs. Joe's Hut, maybe they also do catering, and maybe what the person who you're actually doing this for, i.e. in this case, because it was weddings, the couple that are getting married, maybe they don't like Amy's Bakery. Maybe they say that their food is trash. Joe's Hut may also do catering, but it may be of a different cost. It may have different tax. There may be different additions and items that would need to be on top of that, which need to be taken account for. Then we have the items based on preference, the items based on cost, the items based on where they come from, and all of the rigmarole that comes into it. So that's going to be one really, really big problem, understanding how to balance the costs and how to know that you're picking something that's going to always measure up to a specific margin. Number two, how do you balance individual preferences? As I stated already, you may know that these guys are the most expensive and you only really want them for a specific type of wedding because in the previous situation, there are a bunch of tiers. Well, Amy's Bakery also does catering. Maybe they are also something that's a little bit more on the budget option. Maybe they're even preferred. How do you actually understand preferences, not just from an external view, i.e. the couple getting married, but from an internal view, i.e. the preferred vendor and what you like to provide for those people? What if prices change over time for different items? That's also another big thing because you need to take into consideration if Joe's Hut decides to double their prices. You want to know if this is still a good idea to start selling or to continue selling. You also want to know how that's going to affect the invoices. You also want to change a lot of the things that you do on the upfront when it comes to marketing this as well. And then how do you calculate cost when it's time-based or quantity-based? So for example, you might have another in-house item, which would just be event staff, and these event staff could be, you know, a manager, or it could be a cleaner, or it could be attendants or whoever it would be that are just like there on the night. These are different types of people. They also run different shifts, which means that some people are going to be on for longer than others. The cleaner may actually have to stay on an hour or two after everybody else is gone. The manager may also have to stay with them, whilst the people who are managing the day on the just insofar as sorting out how the weddings are going, etc., they may leave early and they may start a tiny bit early as well. So each one of these people come at different times. There also may be different numbers of them. So you may have 2 cleaners for a massive event or 1 cleaner for a small event. You may have 5 for a massive event, 3 for a small event. You may have 1 manager for a small event and 2 for a large event. When it comes time to calculating cost, calculating cost when it comes to the amount of time spent, the amount of quantity, like the number of people and how many hours, etc., that they're spending on the event and all of the other things that go in with it, things get really messy really, really quickly. So I want to show you with an example that we're actually going to create live how to solve this problem. So what I have here is an empty Airtable, and this is where everything starts. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to create the tables one by one, and I'm going to show you step by step how things are going to go. And the very first step is, for number 1, you need to grab all of the items. Grab all of the individual items. Now, what does that mean? Well, here's how everything works when it's meant to work correctly. So if we say this is number 1, grab all of the individual items, we know that this is the first thing we need to do, which means we need a table here called items. Now, this table is going to give us just a straight list of this is the thing, this is the item, this is the thing, this is the item. So what we're going to do is we're going to make all of this from scratch. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to delete a few of these columns. And then we're just going to build this together so that you have an understanding as to exactly what's meant to go here. Now, am I going to sit here like a melon when I know the AI can help me here? No, I'm not going to. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up this here over to the side, which is called Omni. This is Airtable's internal app builder, and you can ask it questions. You can do a bunch of different things as well. So I'm going to create the prompt, which is going to generate the table that I want right here. And then we're going to come back to it once it's been made. And here we are. Now, Airtable's AI is very clunky. There could be so much better that can go in with it, but we got exactly what we need, which is the exact items that we are looking for. So you can see here, we have wedding cakes, which is food and beverage, catering services. We have a live band. We have round tables. We have Chiavari chairs. Nice. Bridal bouquet, centerpieces, DJ services, photography, videography, table linens, and so on and so forth. So that's the first table. The second table is vendors. And the vendors are the list of businesses that have all of the items that they sell. So we would have the examples that we showed before, which was like Joe's Hut, Amy's Bakery. We can say the wedding shop. We can also say, for example, B&Q, and then anything else. And we'll just say it, the company. we'll say company A as well, to assume that this is just in-house items. So this is the name, or these are the names that we have. And we can see here that item number one, or thing number one, is to grab all of the individual items, whereas thing number two is to list all of the preferred vendors. So that's number two. After we've listed the preferred vendors, we then need to enrich both tables. Now I've already enriched table one, which is all the individual items. We now need to enrich the preferred vendors, and that's where we're going to add business addresses. This is where we're going to add tons of information about where they are, who they are, the main point of contact, their email, and so on and so forth. This is just a general relational database understanding, or this is just what you need to do whenever you're building Airtables. You want to build things that have properties. So the things are the table, which is the actual, like the table that you're building. The properties are all of your columns. So if this was, for example, a clients table, the thing is clients. The properties would be client name, client company name, client first person first contact or main contact. It would be the client's email, what they were sold on, an example of the contract, or like the contract as an attachment, the service that they're on, what their business does, onboarding form fields, and just a bunch of other things like that. So this is the way that we're building things out. We need to have a thing, and then we need to have properties for the thing. We need to have an object and its characteristics. That's the best way to think about it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to enrich this table with the rest of the information that the vendors are normally going to have. And I'm going to do that using the AI once again. All right, so now we have the vendors, and you can see here we got the names, the emails, the items that they provide, and if they're a preferred vendor or not. So this here will combine with these here in a new table, which is called packages. And as you can understand, both of these need to link together, and then we need to now start to describe exactly what we're going to be giving to people. So number three is, after enriching both of these tables, we then need to combine them in a junction table called packages. And the junction table is as simple as this. All we need to do is we need to take the name of this to be item plus vendor. So we're going to need two linked records, one to items. So this is the item, I can't spell. And then this, which we'll just skip that. And then this is a link to the vendor. And we will skip that as well. And then what you'll notice is that we can start to combine the two. So we can have wedding cakes from Joe's Hut, wedding cakes from Amy's Bakery, and then we can have catering services from Joe's Hut. We can also have catering services from company A, and we can start to combine these. And over time, what you'll see is that with these packages and with this combination of information, you now have an understanding of where the items are going to live insofar as pricing and a number of other things are concerned. So I'm going to fill this table out and you're going to see exactly how it looks. So this is an understanding of what it looks like. We have the items and we have the vendors. Each item has a per item price and some tax attached to it. So this here is also the package ID. And in fact, I've actually got a bunch of things here attached to it, which I don't need, which is why it looks like that. But this is what it looks like insofar as the item, the vendor, and how they combine. And all I did here was I created what's called I've even forgotten the name of it, but I basically concatenated the name of the item and the vendor. And all I did was I wrote in here, I wanted item plus vendor in brackets, handle any errors or zero values gracefully, and it gave me just an if statement which does exactly that. So if for whatever reason I just got rid of being cute, it would show me this. So I'll just put that back. And if I got rid of these, it would show me this. So it's just a way for us to understand exactly what is what. And now the only thing we need to do left is to find out what the internal cost per item is for every single thing on this list. So the way that this looks right now, we have items and vendors, and we have a package ID. So this catering service from Joe's Hut and this catering service from company A, one costs 80 quid per item, one costs 45 quid per item. Now per item may mean that it could be $45 per person for the catering service, which may be a set menu if it's done through company A. Joe's Hut may be a 3-course meal for $80 per head for the individual wedding. We want to understand exactly how much it is per item, meaning if all things unchanged and we just have one thing for the wedding in and of itself, we just have this cost and that's all it is. But there needs to be some tax applied to it. When it comes to understanding per item, per person who comes through, and quantity in hours and any extra ancillary fees on top of that for each individual item, that's where the next thing is going to come along. But before we even get to the next thing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry out a quick formula, which is going to be called internal cost. Now, internal cost is as simple as the price multiplied by the tax, or the price plus tax. So what I want here is per item price. And what I've done here is I've just opened up the create formula with AI. So I want the per item price multiplied by 1 plus tax, and if there is no tax, give me the per item price by itself. Now what this should do is, if for example it's $12 and the tax is 10%, it should calculate $13.20. If there is no tax, it should calculate 12. So if I create the field, you'll see that for this one here, this is 12, this is 10. 10 plus 20% is 12. 1,000 plus 5% is 1050. So we're good to go here. So all we need to do now is format this as a currency, and that gives us our internal cost, which you can see from this side here. So we have each cost for each of the packages. And now what we want to do is we want to take the packages and we want to create two more tables. We now need to create the quotes table and the line items table. Line items table. I've not been able to spell for days. I don't know what's going on with my fingers. Create quotes table and the line items table. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this table called line items, and we'll start off with line items. And in fact, we can make both of them together, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to configure line items first. Now with the line items, this here is a combination of the specific quote and the individual line item or the individual package. So I'm going to show you what that looks like right now. So this is what the line items look like right now. And we built out a few dummy quotes just over here so that you can also see how things are going to materialize. I'm only going to add 1 or 2 rows here simply because a lot of this is now going to start getting made inside of the interfaces, and we'll get there in a second. But considering where we're at, we've created the quotes table and the line items table. The next thing we need to do is we need to create some dummy quotes and then calculate the rest of the numbers based on requirements. So what I mean by this, certain people are going to have a certain markup or certain logic that is embedded into the way that they do things. For example, with the client that we were working with, they wanted to have a total margin of 40%. So we needed to multiply all of our costs by 1.67. Now that internally doesn't specifically make sense, but with what we were doing and how it ended up calculating, it always made up as 40%. So as far as ignore the fact that those numbers don't kind of like make sense when you just think about them, we just played around with them until 40% was basically the average number for everything that we got. So in doing so, that gave us everything that we needed in order to calculate what we needed for that client. Now you may have different requirements. You may not need that amount of profit. You may want more profit. There may be some other costs or other fees that may get in the way of that number. You may be aiming for a different type of metric. Maybe it's just the number of people who give you X, Y, and Z as far as the size of the quote or the size of the project in and of itself. There are going to be other requirements that you're going to need to add, but where we have described all of the tables and the way that the tables will look, we now have everything that we need in place to actually solve for all of these whoops, we now have everything that we need in order to solve for the 4 questions that we described over here, which is how to balance the costs, individual preferences, how prices change over time, and cost on time-based or quantity-based items. But we're not done. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish this off by adding we'll add a few of these items to this quote, and then we'll add some packages to them. So let's say they want Joe's Hut's circular red velvet cake, they want the round table from B&Q, and they want, chairs from B&Q as well. Well, that's fine. That's all fine and good to go. We also need to understand, based on what's going on here, how many people are going to be at the wedding. So now we need to flesh out this table. All we needed to do is have this, this, and this open, because what we're going to do at the end of this is we're going to calculate what the actual cost is and then get those final numbers. But we need to understand what this table is going to look like. So we're going to build this table out right now. So we have a start time and end time. We also have people in attendance and the event length. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make the rest of this in the interfaces. So I'm going to click build myself, and I'm going to click build an interface, and I'll call this the quotes. We'll give it a nice little icon, and then we'll click next. And what we want is a record review. This is the view that we want, and we want to build this on quotes. So you can see here the name of the couple are here, and all of the fields are right here as well. So if I click next, and then I add this, and then I'll call this quotes, all quotes, we'll click finish. That gives us this view. Now what we're going to do with this view is as follows. We also are looking for the line items, which we're looking for the line items, which are right here. Now, the way that this looks, if we just make all of these editable by highlighting this and then clicking editable, we can now change the names, the start times, the end times, people in attendance, the event length, and the line items. This field here is going to turn into a view. And when it turns into a view, we get this. Now, when we want to add an item, we can click here and we can pick our items. But what we want to be able to do is we also want to be able to add them. Well, we want to click into the record details. That's the first thing. We can do that. But what we also want to do is just add a number of items whilst we're in there. So if we click edit records in line, and then we click add/delete records in line as well. Yep, and click into record details is also there too. We can now click publish, and then as you'll see, I'll click not now for the sharing. As you'll see, when I click add item, we can add any item by its name, and then we can just pick the package that we want. Now we're not actually showing everything that we need to show. So what we need to do is we need to go back into edit pages. And then once we're here, we click on fields, and then we click on hours and quantity and cost for each. We can leave cost for each item for now. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to change the line item name to something else, because we have the package, we have the hours, we have the quantity, and we also know that this is for this wedding. So we're going to turn this line item name into a formula, which is very, very similar to the package ID. So I'm going to do that now. And now we have a line item name. So you can see here that it is just the package dash the name of the quote. So this is the B&Q round tables for Jerry and Amira. This is a Chiavari chairs B&Q for Jerry and Amira. And these are the catering service from Joe's Hut for Terrell and Gemma. We also have the quantity in hours, and we also have the delivery fee. So what we are going to do here is if you go back into the interfaces, we can add all of those items. We've already added hours and quantity. We now just need to add delivery fee, which you can see right here. And then because these are all editable, we can now make a specific calculation, which is going to give us the cost of all of these things. So if we just say that this service is, you don't need a specific number of hours. I'll just click publish so that this can be looked at a little bit clearer. We don't need a specific number of hours, but let's say because there are 50 people in attendance, we want 50 of these. And the delivery fee is a flat, $25. Okay, sweet. Now, what does this mean? We don't know what this means right yet, because we don't have an amount for what it costs internally to bring on these people for all 50, to have the catering service for all 50 people plus the delivery fee. We also don't know how much we're going to mark this up and sell it when it comes to giving the invoice to the person whose wedding it is. That's what we're going to calculate right now. So the final step here after we've created some dummy quotes and then calculated the rest of the numbers based on requirements, we now need to create the final costs internally and externally. And that is the final step. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to take this line items record or this line items table, and then we're going to add 2 formulas to it. Now, the formula 1 that we are going to create is total internal cost. And that is going to be the cost for each item multiplied by the quantity multiplied by the hours plus the delivery fee. Now, we need to be able to handle if something is not based on hours or if something is not based on quantity. Now, more often than not, everything is going to be based on quantity. So we can just keep it as 1 for that. We just need to account for hours. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say cost for each item multiplied by quantity multiplied by hours plus delivery fee. So this is exactly how it's meant to look. I put brackets around these because of bod mass or bid mass or whatever you learned at school. And then we need an if statement to exclude hours if hours is blank. So we create the formula. Let's see how it looks. And what this should calculate for us is, okay, if hours is blank, then we are getting the cost for each item multiplied by the quantity plus the delivery fee. But if the hours does exist, then we're getting cost for each item times by the quantity times by the hours plus the delivery fee. Now, this, I believe, does follow the right. Hold on. I think it's going to be this times by the quantity plus delivery fee. And then it's going to be this quantity in hours plus delivery fee. That should be exactly what we're looking for. Or not. All right, let's fix this. Hide the troubleshooting. I'm going to show you what I'm doing right now. So when it's wrong or it comes out with errors, one of the best sentences, and I picked this up dealing with a lot of stuff inside of Cursor and Claude Code, etc. I see it in a ton of people's different like Claude MD files and what they're using in order to get the agent to do things that they know are going to override certain errors, is the term handle errors gracefully. So what I've done, or what I'm about to do, is I'm going to say handle 0 values gracefully. So I just copy and pasted this formula and I'm going to see how this works. And what this should do is it should give us a situation where we can understand exactly, okay, it's bloated this up. So if this doesn't work, I will actually just pause it and then just keep on going. Yeah. So this is really not a complicated thing. So I'm just going to pause and write it myself. Okay. So I just ended up writing it. So I just knew how to write it. So I just clicked if hours is blank or hours is 0, then we want to calculate exactly what I said we've got to calculate, which is quantity times by the cost for each item plus the delivery fee. If not, then we can calculate with quantity and hours in place. So that is everything that we need. I'm just going to click currency and then that should be all good to go. So now we have $4,025 for the catering because it's 80 times 50 plus the 25 and there are no hours involved in this. So we're all good to go. So that's the total internal cost. Now the total actual cost takes into consideration a field that I have hidden, which is called the margin multiplier. The margin multiplier is very much just a number. So I've just put 1.7 here because what we'll do is we'll add 70% to the internal cost. And that is going to give us the actual cost that we put on the invoice. So what I'm going to say is the invoice amount. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to duplicate this field and I'm going to call it invoice amount. And then I'm just going to add multiply by margin multiplier. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this. But I don't want to multiply the margin multiplier after delivery fee. So I'm just going to do this one. And this should also come out as, 1.7 times by 4,025. And as you can see, 6,842.50, which is 1.7 times 4,025. So all I did here was I just got it to add to multiply it all by the margin multiplier. Now, if the delivery fee is something that isn't included inside of that margin multiplier, then that has to go, the formula needs to change. But for the purposes of what we need, that's perfectly fine. So if we go into the interfaces again, we can now add over here 2 more items, which are the total internal cost and the invoice amount. And I'm going to change the name of this one to invoice amount. And that is going to reflect inside of our interface. And as you can see here now, we have $6,842.50 for this item, which is 50 people going through the catering service for Terrell and Gemma's wedding. Now, we can now add a ton of different line items to this and then formulate the entire wedding. So what I'll do is I'll just add a bunch of extra rows and then create an entire wedding. And then the last thing we'll need to do is we'll need to add up all of the things that are going to fall under here. So this is what a full wedding would look like. So we have all of the caterers, we have the cake, we have the tables, the chairs, the live band, the tent, the officiant, the service, the bar service, photography, bridal bouquet, blah, 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 blah. You can see everything's here. We have the package, we have the quantity for each, assuming a 50-person wedding, which lasts for 12 hours. We have the number of hours that the things that require hourly rates are concerned. And then we have delivery fees. The only thing we have a delivery fee, we can add a delivery fee for the cake. Let's add like a $10 delivery fee for the cake and a $10 one for this. And then for the tent, it could be like $50 as well. That gives us this table, which is a very easy and understandable way to show exactly where all of the costs will align. The final thing we need at the bottom is the sum of this and the sum of this. So if we go back into the data and then we go over to quotes, we need 2 more of these formulae. And this is going to give us the invoice amount and then the total cost internally. So what we need right now, instead of a formula per se, we need a roll up. So we need to get the total invoice amount. And this from the line items is going to be the invoice amount sum $21,000. Then if we duplicate this, we can say what is the total internal cost, and that is, instead of picking invoice amount, we pick total internal cost, and that is going to give us 12,000 internal for 21,000. Now what we can do is we can now calculate the margins and we can calculate the percentage margin, so the profit and then the margins essentially. So we can then take these 2 values and then calculate the profit, where the profit is going to be the invoice amount, take away the internal cost, and we're going to have that in currency. So we have $8,700 in profit on a $21,000 invoice. And then the margin, if we make a formula out of that, is going to be the profit divided by the internal cost. This is maths, and math is meant to be my forte. I'm doing this on the fly. Yep, 70%. So now you can see here, worried there because everybody's going to catch my kryptonite in real life. We now have the margin, and the margin on this is 70%, because we can even see that based on the amount that was made versus the amount that it cost, this is what we have. This is basically what we've achieved. So perfect. All right, now we need to add these values down here to the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another group, and then we're going to call this calculations. We could also just call it finances, and then we add those last items down here as the invoice amount, the internal cost, the profit, and the margin. And if you want to blow up anything, because for a number of reasons, people can forget that the thing that they're meant to give to the client is a specific number and the others are meant to be for somebody else, then we can pretty much do this. Now I actually blew up the wrong one. So we actually want the invoice amount to be the one that gets blown up. So this is how much it's going to cost them. So this is what we need to put on the invoice. This is how much it's going to cost us. This is the profit we're going to make, and this is the margin that we're going to make as well. Now, we can make the margin look a little bit more fancy as well by adding a progress bar and percent values. We can change the shape of the progress bar. We can make it we can conditionally format the margins themselves. So let's say if the margin was greater than 0.5, or actually 50 because it's 50%, then it's green. Otherwise, it can be when the margin is less than or equal to 49%, we can make it yellow. And let's say greater than or equal to 30%. And then we can add a color where the margin is less than 30%. So now we can add conditional formatting to our margins. So if I save that, you'll see that we're in the green. If I now go in and, for example, I changed not the margin, sorry. If I go in and I change the multiplier, which we can find over here on the line items, from 1.7 to let's say 1.2, this is going to change the numbers drastically, which is going to make the profits way worse. So if I go back into the interfaces, you'll see that now that I've changed it to 1.2, 20%, it's now gone red. And we can make this extra large. I'll make it large. That's probably the easiest way. So that in a nutshell is exactly how you would make a quote engine for yourself. There are a couple of other things that I could add to this video, but we're already 35 minutes in. A lot of the things that we've been able to do, this was the foundation. And when I talk about backend data warehouse and having your data in a structure that makes it make sense, it's this type of stuff, the maths, the boring data stuff, which makes everything that we make way, way better. And you can see that in this pyramid here. What we've played around with today is the backend data warehouse and the front end interface and UI. We have all of the databases with, instead of client, team, and project information, we have item, vendor, package, line items, and quotes. And the front end interface and UI is what we were clicking on when we drew up that table with the line items and everything else that went into it. We do all of that before we get fancy. And this is what fancy looks like. So where you saw at the start of the video, when I was in the interfaces and I went through and changed this item, when I changed this item and all of these spawned new items as well, that was powered by an automation, and that automation looks something like this. So when a record is updated inside of our event quote customization, you can see that we have some conditional formatting. All of these conditions have a script attached to them, and this is where we run a ton of JavaScript. And when we run these automations, we can then pull in different things over time based on exactly what each template is concerned as. And the way that we formulated these templates is we basically said, okay, we've made this now. We now need you guys to make your templates. So this is the template for this one. This is the template for this, and the template for this. And all we needed to do was take a screenshot of these line items and then tell our Claude, which had a connector that was attached to the database through a personal access token. We just said, hey, you already know what the base looks like. You already know exactly what this linked item field is meant to be. Take this and turn it into JavaScript that I can use to create this or update a set of rows, which will give us A, B, and C, which are linked back to this. That spins up basically spins up the entire thing. It gives us all of those automations, which then go in and create the exact click a button, everything poof type of automation that we would want. We can also create automations that would then change the number of all of the things that are based on numbers as well. So if, for example, we had a ceremony that had 50 people in it, just like I've shown you, instead of going in and clicking 50 all the time, there are going to be specific line items or specific items that need 50 people on them, or they need the exact amount. For example, chairs, cutlery, and a bunch of other things. There are some that are based on, let's say there's 8 people to a table. If there's 8 people to a table, we know that there's 50 people. We know that we need 7 tables. We can have the scripts spin those things up for us. And when we have them spin it up for us, everything works as effectively as it could do. And from there, we can create dashboards. We can create a bird's eye view of all of the metrics as they're happening. Now, I'm not going to zoom in because this is the dashboard, and this is exactly what it looks like for quotes, for the client, but you can see that you can build a ton of stuff the moment you have your data correct. So if you are somebody who, again, is doing a lot of customization with a ton of Excel spreadsheets, let's say you are doing construction projects, you're doing kitchen remodeling, you're doing event planning, you're doing anything that requires the creation of different quotes, there's a link in the description. Go and find out some more information, see how I can help. My website, icarusgrowth.com as well. You can find some more information there. And there's going to be some videos related about some other stuff that I built as well. Talk to you soon.